And for more on this story, we're joined by Tara Kangarlou. She is a professor at Georgetown University and author of Art of Hope, The Heartbeat of Iran. Thanks so much for being with us. As we just saw in that report there were these state-organized demonstrations across Iran today meant to counter this week of anti-government unrest that we saw. From the outside, how should we see this? Was this something we should have expected to see, these, pro-government protesters taking to the streets?
Thank you so much for having me. Just one correction there. I'm the founder of Art of Hope, which is a charity organization that focuses on supporting refugees' mental health, different than my book, The Heartbeat of Iran. But back to your question and the protests, there's sort of anti-democracy protests that we saw today. Again, Friday in Iran, it's often that pro-regime supporters come out. They are loud, they're vile, they are there, but in numbers, they are small. So no, I am not surprised to see this. The Iranian president reportedly had returned to Tehran from New York as he was attending the UNGA. So no, I am not surprised, but these anti-democracy, essentially pro-regime protests are much smaller and quieter and, quite frankly, effective in comparison to the millions that we've seen come to the streets across the country in Iran.
Yeah, you're mentioning those millions of people. We saw women burning their headscarves, their hijabs in protest this week. Can you just talk about the risks that people are taking, especially women, in carrying out these protests and speaking out like this?
Absolutely. I think it's safe to say, speaking to folks in Iran, as I have been the last couple of days and today, with the current internet restrictions, everyone's saying that the protests that we're seeing on the streets are bigger and more energetic than what we saw in 2019, and also way back in 2009, both of which were stifled and choked by the regime. But right now, people are on the street with the knowledge that they will be choked, they will be brutally cracked down, and they will be killed. But they're out there and they're not stopping. And I think that really is reflective of their anger and rage against a regime that has been oppressing them on all fronts. Again, this is not just about hijab. This is not just about headscarf, but a system that has been stifling millions of ordinary citizens from their basic rights day in and day out. And I have to say that women and girls as young as 14, 15, 16 are on the streets, and in many ways they are leading these protests. And if they see results, we have to really admit that this was a revolution and momentum, rather, that was led and fought by millions of Iranian women for their freedom of choice.
Well, you're talking about momentum there. As you watched the protest this week, you followed this closely. Did you have a feeling that this time things could be different?
That's a question that I think everyone is asking. There are a few differences. Like I mentioned, we're seeing young teenagers on the street, teenagers that essentially have seen their parents, mothers, fathers, older siblings live for 40 years under a very confined establishment that has been uprooting them from their basic rights for years. So the demographic is quite young. And another thing I want to add is that we're seeing protests in parts of the country that previously have been perhaps more quiet. In places like the island of Kish and Qeshm, we're hearing that people are on the streets, or parts of Tehran that otherwise the people would not come out, even in the north. So people are out, people are angry, again, with the knowledge that there will be repercussions. But, from what we've been seeing, they want to continue the momentum, and they are asking for change. And if I may, I just want to add that one of the demands that people in Iran have been having has been for the international community to support them technologically. And just a few hours ago, we saw the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, announcing that companies such as Starlight can essentially surpass the imposed sanctions on Iran to provide satellite technology to the people. So efforts like this matter, and the Iranian people want to raise their voice and break free.
Yeah, we have been following that part of the story, the crackdown on the internet. I did want to ask you one final thing here. Do you think this kind of morality policing of women increased since the election of the new government? And do you expect it to escalate from here?
I think, yes, pretty much everyone knew of the current President Raisi's resume. He is known to be a conservative, in fact, an ultra-conservative. So I don't think anyone was surprised to see these mandates, harshen. However, one thing I would say that really speaks to the hypocrisy of this is that, a couple of months ago, or rather in August, I believe, the government issued, this new policy that we would fine women for, not abiding but by what they deem permissible hijab. And I think that just speaks to hypocrisy, that, how can you find something that's supposed to be religious? And again, that speaks volumes to the hypocrisy and corruption of the system that is trying to control people's choices. And so to your question about whether it would harshen, I think they have bigger problems right now trying to, contain or see, what to do with the protests. But again, people's hopes, millions of Iranians are hoping that their movement would see some change. And the government has to deal with louder and bigger voices right now than what, it has been before.
Okay, we want to thank you, Tara Kangarlou, a professor at Georgetown University and author of The Heartbeat of Iran. I think I got that right this time. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Sure.